There are plenty of Baki characters that can be called insane for their inhuman physical strength, endurance, fighting skills, or any combination of those three things. Most of them are crazy for putting themselves through the kind of abuse that they do, but you could also classify that as conviction. Only a few characters in the Bakiverse can be truly called cuckoo crazy, and this guy is arguably top of the list. Spec is one of the 5 dangerous criminals that broke out of their prisons to go to Tokyo and taste defeat. And from the get-go, we knew this guy was going to be involved in some nasty business. And as the series unfolded, he proved us correct with every move he made, because despite looking like an NBA player that doubles as a strongman for some reason, Spec is one of the most sadistic people in the Bakiverse, and his anatomy is a huge reason for that. So, without further ado, let's dive straight into it. This is Spec's Anatomy Explored. We don't know why he's in prison, but it must be terrible because he's in a submarine. Spec's introduction to Baki. Baki 2018 starts off with the delightful premise of the world's most powerful, undefeated convicts breaking out of their prisons and seeking out the world's strongest 17-year-old boy in order to taste defeat. This shocking moment of synchronicity is only compounded upon by the various execution methods that each criminal withstands. Hector Doyle can't be given the electric chair. Dorian can withstand being hung by the neck for over 10 minutes, standard convict stuff. Sikorsky can escape a missile silo with walls nearly as smooth as glass, and Yanagi can break his reinforced cell apart by creating a vacuum with his palm. But none of them achieved the anatomical insanity that Spec did. The guy managed to escape from a friggin' submarine, and not one that was docked, mind you. But first, let's talk about why he was put in there in the first place. Officially, we have no information on the background of the man called Spec, but we do know his appearance is based off of real-life serial killers Richard Spec and Andre Chikatilo, so we can use that to speculate as to the nature of his crimes. Before his trial, Spec from Baki looks so much like Richard Spec and Chikatilo, and judging by the way he talks about things and some of the things he does, he might just have walked in their shoes and made them worse for wear. Richard Spec was an American serial killer that murdered 8 women in a nursing dorm in a single night. Andre Chikatilo was a reviled serial killer active in the Soviet Union from 1978 to 1990, known as the Rostov Ripper. He killed and violated over 50 women and children that we know of, and these men are fitting inspirations for the absolute monstrosity of a man that is Spec, who is described as less of a man and more of an intelligent beast by Keisuke Itagaki. In his introductory scene, we learn that he used a packet of ketchup served to him at lunch as fake blood to lure in a psychologist and break his face with a fist that's probably more battering ram if you look at the aftermath. His personality is entirely unhinged, as he does the most revolting things with a creepy smile stuck to his face. And considering that it's a mix of Richard Spec and Andre Chikatili's faces, it was plenty creepy already. The rest of the convicts that head to Tokyo to face off against Baki are all convicted for assassinations, murders, and worse things, so it only stands to reason that Spec would also be one crazy SOB. But the rest of them were kept in high security prisons that would still be considered humane compared to Spec's place of confinement. They were at least kept in prisons on land. Well, in Sikorsky's case, within the land, but you get our point. Spec was confined in a submarine 200 meters under sea level, and the fact he escaped from it isn't just impressive, it's an anatomical miracle. He can withstand pressure 200 meters under sea level and break apart a car with his bare hands. Spec's insane anatomy. Right after we get an explanation of what Spec did to his last psychologist, we see his inhuman physique at work as we witness what he does to his new one. The guy had to take off everything that could become a weapon in Spec's hands, even tie pins and cufflinks, and he still ended up dying because Spec pulled his neck to the side of a vent and mushed him to death. Then he used his bare hands to take out a golden tooth in the guy's mouth, jam it in the opening doors for the submarine, and escaped a vessel that resides 200 meters under sea level. Now, the reason why this is such an impressive anatomical feat is because a human being not wearing a diving suit would have their lungs collapse after they crossed 50 meters. The moment Spec stepped outside of that submarine, his lungs should have squished into themselves, but he managed to bypass that by simply not breathing until he made it to the surface. Spec can hold his breath for upwards of 5 minutes, and more than that, he has the sheer body strength to power his way to the surface before his breath runs out. Once he got up there, he slaughtered an entire Coast Guard unit with no weapons before proceeding expecting to arrive in Tokyo and setting out on a search for the strongest man in the world, Baki. Spec manages to find Baki pretty easily, considering Baki didn't really try to hide himself, and so ensues a chess game of increasingly personal taunts that starts with Spec trying to shake Baki's hand with the severed hand of one of his friends. He also crashes Baki's date with Kozue later on, so boundaries aren't really something he's that concerned with, and that makes sense because Spec seems to function with the understanding that might makes right. His mental instability and bloodlust aside, Spec is a remarkable physical specimen. Standing at 7'3", weighing somewhere between 100 to 200 kilos, Spec is a muscled freak whose most disturbing feature is his psychotic grin. He has trained his body to the point where he can withstand the pressure felt 200 meters underwater with no equipment to assist him, and he also possesses blinding reflexes. When Police Chief Sonoda tries to kick Spec in the nuts for treating the police station like his base, Spec is able to stop the incoming attack before it makes connection with one hand occupied by Chinese snacks. His reaction time is relevant here because Sonoda is a judoka, which means the speed of his kick is much faster than what you'd expect from a regular fella, and Spec just treats it like a slow-moving robot hand. He was also only allowed to come and go as he pleased in the Tokyo Police's prison facility because he broke through their walls like Shockmaster from WCW, and he could leave, kill a man, rob a grocery store, and be back to take a leak all before the Japanese police could conclude a single briefing. Spec's strikes clearly possess immense strength and force, as he was able to turn a car into junkyard scrap using nothing but his fists, leaving even the people who discovered the scene baffled by his innate strength. He was also able to stun Baki momentarily with kicks and stomps that caught the underground arena champion completely off guard. Yet Spec's most impressive physical attribute has to be his endurance to pain and damage. In order to deal with the world's most dangerous convicts, the Japanese police force created an elite unit and equipped them with state-of-the-art gear that could tank most modern weaponry with its padding and design. They wore vests and helmets specifically designed to go up against heavy fire, and were given weapons that shot out iron balls at such velocity that upon making contact with a human limb, it would make that limb explode like a melon. Not only was Spec able to withstand being shot with multiple iron balls directly to the face, he also wiped out the entire unit all by himself, giving one man a particularly gruesome death by grabbing his neck and pulling it backwards. Helmet, vest, and all else be damned. He doesn't use a single weapon in his early appearances because he doesn't need to. His creepy smile and his fists are enough to finish the job. Then he meets a man who cannot be dealt with by his conventional means, so he has to dive deep into his arsenal and whip out something that permanently damaged the Statue of Liberty. And no, we're not joking. He almost broke the Statue of Liberty and Kaoru Hanayama, but his heart's desire caught up with him. Why Spec lost despite his endurance. Sometime after Spec's escape, we cut to New York City, where a security guard comes across a sheet covering a section of the Statue of Liberty. He takes it off to reveal dozens upon dozens of punches engraved into the oxidized copper, and turns out that sheet was the only thing holding things together because as soon as it's removed, the Statue of Liberty cracks in several places and starts falling apart. It's only held together by a bunch of airdropped cables due to an emergency, but the fact that Spec's punches broke the Statue of Liberty is all you need to know about how strong this dude really is. He uses his inhuman ability to hold his breath for upwards of 5 minutes to execute a flurry of punches from which there is no escape. Because he doesn't need to stop to take a breath, his reflexes are always on point during those 5 minutes, making the onslaught so brutal that, well, it can break the Statue of Liberty. Spec has only used this ability twice in the series, once against the symbol of freedom, and second against Yakuza boss Kaoru Hanayama. Guess who took it better down in the comments section down below if you don't already know, but if you do, just hang on for a bit and you'll understand why we're talking about it right now. Spec had already demonstrated inhuman endurance before his fight with Hanayama. When he was trying to intimidate Baki into a fight, he shot his gun through his jaw more than a half-dozen times and just laughed off the injury like it was nothing. In his fight with Hanayama, it became even more evident as he was not only able to withstand multiple hits from one of the heaviest hitters in the Bakiverse, he withstood being electrocuted, endured the dreaded vice grip, and managed to blitz Hanayama into a corner with his apnea rush technique. Although Hanayama's brute power won him round 1, Spec came back craftier in round 2, shoving bullets into Hanayama's mouth and making them blow up, blowing up his kneecaps so he couldn't walk anymore, and just generally putting the beating down on a man who was already suffering from severe internal injuries. As the Statue of Liberty can attest, Spec's fists are no feather. others. He even managed to continue fighting on with 2 mangled limbs, courtesy of Hanayama's vice grip, until the mob boss finally turned things around and beat Spec into a pulp. Slightly anticlimactic when you think of all the amazing feats he achieved before falling to an established second character in the Bakiverse, but the reason Spec even keeping up with Hanayama in round 1, let alone going for round 2 is impressive, is because he isn't as old as he appears to be. Spec looks like a middle-aged man that eats his vitamins and doesn't skip leg day for anything, but the truth is, he's much older than that. He's actually 97 years old, and the only reason he looks so much younger than he truly was because of his deep internal desire to taste defeat. Spec lived his entire life to fight and humiliate people, but his true desire was to taste defeat like every other convict that came looking for Baki. This desire was so strong that it kept him at his peak physical condition, irrespective of his actual age. Fighting Hanayama fulfilled him so deeply that once he fell into the coma, his body started catching up with his age, and he shrunk to 1/3 of his size in just a few days. This is the exact opposite of Kaiokaku, who pretty much looks as old as you'd expect him to be and fights using superior techniques to compensate for his lack of brute strength. The 97-year-old Spec was fueled purely by the desire to taste actual defeat in his life, and it made him one of the craziest, most anatomically durable villains in the entire franchise. He withstood self-inflicted gunshot wounds, an electrocution even Electro would dread, and having his limbs torn apart like a tender brisket, all for the sake of a truly death-defining fight. It made him resistant to superhuman amounts of pain, strong on a superhuman level, and so fast that nutshotting him at top speed is your worst option, where usually it would be your best. Spec is a true freak of nature, and all of that is thanks to his anatomy. Marvelous verdict. And with that, we come to the end of this video. At this point in the story, Spec's future is something of a cliffhanger. The last time we see him is during the final episode of Baki's Season 3, where he's acting rather peculiar to say the least. He's still in a comatose condition, but somehow, Spec has been swimming in air. It sounds crazy, but even in his comatose state, Spec has been swimming on his hospital bed like he's Piscine from Life of Pi. He's regained a lot of his lost muscle, and he's got this crazy-ass grin stuck to his face that suggests whatever's going on in his coma dream is definitely going to be a horror movie franchise at some point in time. Why is he doing this? Well, we think he's probably reliving the experience of escaping that submarine and making his way to Tokyo, because that's the last time he felt truly alive, but we don't think we're going to find that out anytime soon. That episode had Sonoda go around to the containment facilities of all the recaptured world's most dangerous convicts, and nearly all of them were thinking about a prison break. We don't know if this is going to affect anything in the story anymore because Baki has since become a world dominated by sumo wrestlers and T-Rex fighting prehistoric men, but we might hear from Spec again in Baki Rahen, so hit that notification button and set it to always so you don't miss that update. If you enjoyed our content, please like the video and share it with your friends. It helps the channel grow and it gives us an idea of what sort of content you guys want to see. With that said, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.